Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me where you are watching from. I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. I still remember that afternoon as vividly as if it happened yesterday. It was one of those quiet days where the house felt almost too still, the kind of stillness that makes you notice the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock. I had just made myself a cup of tea and settled near the kitchen window, enjoying the gentle sunlight stretching across the table. I wasn't expecting anyone, certainly not family. My nephew Daniel usually called before he came by. But that day I heard the knock, a light but urgent tapping, like someone unsure whether they should even be at the door. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was a neighbor or maybe a delivery. When I opened it and saw Daniel standing there, shoulders drawn in slightly, hands deep in his jacket pockets, I felt a strange mix of surprise and warmth wash over me. He gave me a small smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes, and said, "Aunt Linda, do you have a few minutes?" His voice carried something different, something softer, a little heavier than usual. That alone was enough to catch my concern. Daniel had always been the confident one in the family. Seeing him like that made me step aside without a second thought. Inside, he walked slowly, glancing at the living room as if he hadn't been there 1,000 times growing up. The air between us felt charged with something unspoken. I offered him tea, and he nodded, though I could tell his mind was far from anything warm or comforting. As I poured the water, I could feel him watching me, almost as if gathering the courage to say something he wasn't sure I was ready to hear. "You're awfully quiet today," I said gently, settling across from him at the kitchen table. He looked up, and for a second, I could see the boy he used to be, the one who ran through my hallway chasing imaginary monsters, always laughing. But now he was a young man with thoughts too complex to put into a single sigh. "I didn't know who else to talk to," he finally said. Those words alone sent a ripple through me. He had parents, friends, people his age who understood his world better. Yet he chose my doorway. I felt both honored and deeply concerned. "What's going on?" I asked softly. He took a long breath, his fingers tightening around the warm mug I handed him. I guess I needed someone who actually listens." Something in the way he said it made me lean in a little. There was sincerity there, but also vulnerability, unexpected and unguarded. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, steady, and honest. And that honesty settled between us like a memory we hadn't shared yet. He talked a little, nothing too deep at first. Work frustrations, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like he was supposed to have more figured out by now. I could hear the weight he carried behind each sentence, a weight he didn't quite know how to set down. As I listened, I realized he wasn't just talking about stress. He was talking about being lost, being unsure of himself, being afraid of disappointing people. And somehow, in that quiet kitchen with the fading afternoon light, he felt safe enough to unravel those thoughts to me. His words caught me off balance not because they were shocking, but because they were tender, genuine, and unexpectedly personal. There was something about the way he looked at me, as if he trusted me more in that moment than he trusted the rest of the world. And I sat there, realizing that this unexpected visit was about more than a conversation. It was the beginning of something meaningful, something that would stay with both of us long after the tea grew cold on the table. The sun had shifted by the time we continued talking, stretching long beams of warm light across the floor, softening the tension that had filled the room earlier. Daniel leaned back in his chair a little, as if the act of speaking his worries aloud had taken some weight off him, but I could tell there was more, something he hadn't yet formed into words. He held his tea between his hands, letting the steam rise gently toward his face, and I waited, giving him the space he clearly needed. "You know," he said after a quiet moment, "when I was younger, I always thought adults had everything figured out. He looked up with a small, almost embarrassed smile. "Seeing you now, I guess I'm realizing that no one really does." I chuckled softly, not at him but at the truth of it. "We just get better at pretending," I said. "Life doesn't hand us a manual. We just learn as we go, same as you." He nodded, really taking that in. His gaze drifted toward the window, where the faint movement of tree branches swayed in the breeze. It looked like he was searching for an answer outside, something steady to hold on to. "I think that's why I came," he admitted. "You've always been calm, even when things were messy." He paused. "I needed that today." Those words touched me more deeply than I expected. So many years of being the one people leaned on, the sister who listened, the aunt who showed up to school events, the friend who remembered birthdays. It all felt worth it in that moment. Not because I needed the acknowledgement, but because Daniel, this young man who had always seemed so self-assured, found comfort in my steadiness. It made the connection between us feel somehow renewed, stronger. I leaned forward. "Tell me the part you're avoiding." He laughed under his breath, rubbing his forehead. "Is it that obvious?" "I've known you since you were small enough to hide behind my legs," I said. "Yes, it's obvious." Finally he sighed and spoke, his voice quieter and more vulnerable. "I've just been feeling isolated, like everyone else knows what they're doing, and I'm still waiting for some kind of sign. And the more I try to push through, the more it feels like I'm failing at something I can't even name." Something about his honesty created a new kind of closeness in the room, not dramatic, not heavy, but human and sincere. I reached out, placing my hand over his for just a second, not to fix anything, not to offer a grand solution, but simply to let him know he wasn't alone. He looked at our hands, then at me, and I saw gratitude there, quiet but unmistakable. "You're not failing," I said. "You're growing, and growing feels uncomfortable. It always has." He swallowed, his eyes softening. I guess I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that from someone who actually means it. We sat there for a while, the silence between us warm rather than awkward. There was a subtle shift in the air, a deepening of trust. He wasn't just my nephew in that moment. He was a young man at a crossroads, reaching out for guidance, and I was the person he felt safe enough to approach. The conversation drifted to memories, family gatherings, funny moments from his childhood, things we both thought we'd forgotten. Every shared smile seemed to weave us closer, reminding both of us that connections don't fade unless we let them. Eventually he exhaled deeply, like he had finally let out something he'd been carrying too long. "I'm glad I came," he said softly. "I didn't want to bother you, but this helped more than you know." "You could never bother me," I replied. "My door is always open to you." He gave me a look, steady, warm, and unexpectedly meaningful. A look that held both relief and appreciation, and something else I couldn't quite define yet. Something I felt but wasn't ready to name. And as the light in the kitchen shifted from gold to a soft dusk glow, I sensed that whatever had brought him here today was only the beginning. There was more he wanted to say, and more I needed to understand. The daylight had faded into a gentle bluish hue by the time Daniel stood up from the table and wandered into the living room. I followed him slowly, carrying the sense of our earlier conversation like a warm echo. Something about the way he moved, quiet, thoughtful, told me he was still sorting through pieces of whatever he hadn't yet managed to share. I didn't want to rush him, but I also didn't want him leaving with more weight than he came with. He stopped near the old photo shelf, the one filled with years of family memories, birthdays, summer barbecues, vacations. I watched him pause at a picture of himself at around 10, his hair sticking up in every direction as he hugged a trophy nearly as tall as he was. His smile in the photo was bright, fearless, the kind of joy life rarely lets us hold onto unchanged. "You were always proud of me back then," he said quietly, still staring at the picture. "I still am," I answered. He turned to me slowly, and I could tell those words hit someplace deep. I don't feel like someone to be proud of lately. I settled onto the sofa, gesturing for him to sit. He did, but this time he sat closer than before, as if the distance between us felt unnecessary now. The room was dim except for the warm lamp beside us, casting soft shadows on his face and making him look younger and older all at once. "What happened?" I asked gently. He took a moment before speaking. "I've been dealing with things I didn't know how to talk about. Pressure, expectations, and this feeling that no matter how hard I try, it isn't enough." His voice wavered slightly, "And I didn't want to worry anyone." "You're not a burden," I said. "You never will be." His shoulders relaxed a little, and he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. It was strange, watching someone you've known their whole life reveal a side of themselves they had been guarding carefully. It made me feel protective and connected in a way I hadn't expected. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I guess I just needed someone who sees me, not the version of me everyone else expects." His words hung in the air, and for a moment the room felt incredibly still. I realized that what he sought wasn't advice. It was understanding. Someone who wouldn't judge him, someone who remembered who he was before life piled layers on top of him. "I see you," I said softly. "Not because I'm supposed to, but because I care." He looked at me then, direct, searching, almost startled by how much my words seemed to matter. The connection between us deepened in that quiet moment, subtle but undeniably real. Not inappropriate, not crossing any boundary, but profoundly human. Two people recognizing something meaningful in each other. "I felt that today," he said, "when I was talking earlier. It felt like you actually listened, like what I said mattered." "It does matter," I replied. "You matter." The room felt warmer somehow, the silence gentler. He leaned back, eyes softening as if the world outside had finally quieted enough for him to breathe comfortably. After a moment, he spoke again, his voice lower. "I was scared to come here. Scared you'd tell me to toughen up or that I was overthinking everything." "I'd never dismiss your feelings," I said. "You came because something inside you needed a safe place, and I'm glad you chose me." He rubbed his palms together slowly, absorbing the comfort in those words. The vulnerability he showed wasn't dramatic. It was the quiet kind that reveals itself only when someone feels fully safe. "I think that's why your reaction caught me off balance," he admitted. "I wasn't expecting this kind of understanding." I smiled softly. Sometimes the right person to talk to isn't the person you expect. It's the person you trust without realizing it. He looked at me again, longer this time, as if he was seeing me in a new light. The moment felt fragile but meaningful, filled with a tenderness that didn't cross any lines but deepened the emotional thread between us. "I didn't realize how much I needed this," he said, "not just to talk, but to feel connected again." "You're not alone," I whispered. "Not now, not ever." The house felt different then, warmer, calmer, as if the walls themselves were holding the weight he had set down. And yet, I sensed there was still one more truth lingering on the edge of his mind, something he hadn't said but was gathering the courage to share. The house had slipped fully into evening by the time Daniel finally leaned back on the sofa, his expression thoughtful but steadier than when he had first arrived. The warm lamp beside us cast a gentle glow across the room, softening every edge and making everything feel a little safer, a little quieter. Even the air seemed to settle in a way that made me aware of how meaningful the past few hours had been. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It wasn't the kind of silence that begged to be filled. Rather, it felt like the calm that follows after a long storm passes, when things are still but alive with new clarity. Daniel looked toward the window, where faint reflections danced against the glass. "There's one more thing I should say," he began, his voice calm but carrying a fragile sincerity. "And I've been searching for the right way to say it." I turned toward him, giving him my full attention. Something in the tone of his voice made my heart settle into a slower rhythm, not out of worry but out of a deep readiness to listen. "I didn't come here just because I felt overwhelmed," he said. "I came because you've always been the person who understood me before I even tried to explain myself. I didn't realize how important that was until recently." His words were gentle, almost cautious, as though he didn't want them to sound heavier than he intended. Yet they carried a sincerity that reached me deeply. I felt a warmth in my chest, not romantic, not complicated, just an emotional truth that came from years of quiet, steady connection. "I'm glad you see me that way," I said softly. "And I'm grateful you felt comfortable enough to come here." He nodded, and I could tell he was relieved, not because he feared judgment, but because he had finally expressed something he had carried silently for too long. "I think I needed someone who remembered who I was before I forgot parts of myself," he continued. "Someone who could remind me without making me feel weak." "That's what family does," I replied. "We remind each other of our strength when the world makes us doubt it." He let out a slow breath, the kind that comes only when someone finally feels grounded again. The tension had lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a calm clarity that hadn't been there earlier. "And you did that today," he said. "More than I expected, more than I knew I needed." I felt something shift inside me too. A quiet realization that sometimes life brings unexpected moments of connection that shape us in ways we don't anticipate. Moments that remind us that emotional closeness doesn't always come from dramatic gestures. It often comes from showing up, listening, and being present when someone needs it most. "I'm proud of you," I told him. "Not because you have all the answers, but because you were brave enough to seek support when you felt lost. That takes strength." His eyes softened, grateful, steady, and touched in a way that felt deeply genuine. "I won't forget this day," he said. "I won't forget how you made me feel seen." We sat there quietly, the weight between us now replaced with a gentle warmth. The moment wasn't about big revelations or grand conclusions. It was about understanding and connection, the kind that stays with you long after the conversation ends. Eventually, Daniel stood up, stretching slightly as if his body finally felt lighter. "I should head home," he said, "but I'm going to come by more often. Not only when things are difficult, just to talk." "I'd like that," I replied. "You're always welcome here." He walked to the door, then paused and looked back with a calm sincerity that made the moment linger. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for today, for everything." When the door closed behind him, the house didn't feel empty. Instead, it felt full of meaning, full of understanding, full of the quiet kind of connection that deepens without ever crossing a line. It was a reminder that unexpected moments can reveal the most profound truths, that being present for someone can change the way they see themselves, and change the way you see your own place in their life. And as I stood in the soft glow of the living room, I realized that his unexpected visit had caught me off balance not because of what he said, but because of what it made me remember, that emotional closeness, when shared with honesty and respect, stays with you long after the moment has passed.